Hello, my friends. Welcome or welcome back. I am your local art witch, and today I am super excited to show you some different books I picked up. The last several months have been very unseasonal in my area. All of winter was really odd, really warm. We had a lot of tropical storm type weather that was coming up from Florida when they would have their storms. So it was warm and wet even through December. It's now the last couple days of February. I forgot to look at the exact date, but February's nearly finished and things are melting. It was really, really warm yesterday. I haven't looked, but I bet you that there was some kind of storm in Florida. I wanted to show you some of these books because for the first time ever in my memory, my Wheel of the Year is starting to match up to this one here. This is the one that we generally see. This is more from Celtic, England type area, and apparently their spring hits a lot sooner. You're not going to see these type of activities here that you would generally do in their February. If you are in the UK in that area, if you could let me know how accurate it is that you can start looking for signs of spring in February, let me know, because that's really wild that February is early spring for y'all. It's still usually winter here. I picked up these two books. This one I bought. This one I found secondhand. I'm in Eastern Canada. I live in the Maritimes. This is perfect. So this tells me month by month what I can expect to see. As spring comes, it feels like a new year. And what I like about this particular book, and I bet you could find similar books for your particular area, is it will show you some plants. It will show you the hardiness zones, the frost dates, fall frost dates, when you want your plants up out of their gardens, and the last spring. Yeah, May, June. This exactly here is what I would expect, June or July. Like, frost days a long time here. This here has the climate extremes from 1971 to 2000s. You can see what the extremities are in each of these areas. Now, what I like is we can actually start preparing and avoiding certain things like chemical deicers. They hurt your garden. Top up your bird feeders, things to do. This is really neat to me because I didn't think you could do much of anything in January except to clean out your house. January for me is a purging time, getting rid of the old vibes. And so it's nice to see that I can also do things more than just purge. I can prepare. In February, this is so nice because it feels like I can start to live a little bit more in tandem with nature, but I can start maybe seeing early signs of spring in a different way than I used to look. I have this old magic book. I've showed this to y'all before. And in here, I wrote what activities you can do depending on the Sabbath. And I did change it a little bit because in bulk, spring begins. That is not generally true in my space. So I started with Samhain because I think of that as like the witchy new year. Of course, Christmas season in bulk. And it says, look for signs of spring, 1st of February. There's no way you're going to find eggs. There's a lot of birds that haven't returned yet. The original one that I grabbed this off of said plant your garden, like start preparing your garden. There's no way. Everything would die. You would have to plant it inside. You would have to get flowers from a supermarket of some kind, even in March. You might be able to pick some dandelions this time of year if you wanted to bring in real flowers. I don't think you could find many nests or plants even in March, which was originally in February, if I remember right. June, this is when you would start actually doing spring things here. Like even a flower crown for May, you would have to go to a grocery store or even a dollar store. You could buy some fake flowers and then your flower wreath lasts forever. So this just goes over certain things that I can do. I really want to get more comfortable around plants, keeping them alive. I think that will be good for not just to continue learning and getting more in tandem with my seasons and my year, but I think it will be really good for my mental health to be able to work in the dirt. My dream is to be a bit of a homesteader, to have like an indoor space. We watch Ants Canada, and he has this giant indoor terrarium. He has ant colonies, and he built this giant terrarium for his ants, of course. And I would love a space like this, and I would put my crested geckos in there. And ideally, it would be big enough that I could technically maybe go sit inside. That would be like the ultimate dream. But I'd be scared I'd hurt my geckos, so I guess it wouldn't work. But the other book, I bought this at a specialty store when I went to go visit my mother about a year ago. I want to get outside more. I want to get better with identifying plants and areas in which they grow. I want to bring my kids out with that and teach them a little bit about the natural space that they live in. I will put the information for these guides in the description below. I have a few from this company, Boulder Publications. I love these books. Has a bit of a plasticky cover, like a plastic film, and you can see it's quite textured. I am trying to minimize the amount of plastic in my life, but I don't mind it for this because this book is built to be outside, and if it's in my bag and it gets a little wet on the cover, it's not going to be as big of a deal. The pages are glossy, it's in full color, it's heavy. If I was to guess, this book feels like it weighs about 6 pounds. Here's the other books in this series. Birds of Newfoundland, Edible Plants of Atlantic Canada. That's my next goal. Atlantic gardening would be cool. Now, they break up all of these books in a very interesting way. We have an introduction. It tells us a little bit about the different type of forests, deciduous versus other forest types. And then there's a bit of a key. Are the leaves needle-like? Do they have scales? Are they flat or broad? Different ways that we can start breaking down the task of identifying these plants. We've got the evergreen and the deciduous. And you'll see that it's color-coded. So plants that have certain things in common will be within a certain color. And then you have all these keys here, how the flowers appear. If they come in, I call them florets, like when the flowers appear in bunches, like so. I am sorry about the quality of my voice. It's been bad since October. And I'm starting to think it's not going to go back to normal. Oh, look, wild raisins. Oh, the other thing that's really, really cool about this book, I started making a little book about plants in my area. This was part of my exercise to get to know my space. And I first made a little list, those type of things that I always see. And then I would try to make notes if I was out and about and I saw something. I was like, oh yeah, I do see that. I would take a picture, try to identify it, and then I would research it later. This has been so educational. I live in an urban area, and when I would look up these plants that I was seeing all the time, every single one of them was an introduced and or invasive species. There is a small difference between the two. An introduced species, it was brought over like the dandelion, maybe the seeds just on somebody's coat. And then there's these invasive ones that will take over and suck up all the nutrition for the native species, and it just kind of takes over. In urban areas, in areas of disruption, these invasive and introduced plants will be more prevalent. You need to go to areas that does not have human activity, or like sometimes a flood will wash out some stuff and that will bring in these invasive plants. And when I was making my list and all of the plants were introduced and or invasive, I kind of got depressed. I had to put it down because I got to this point where I was like, maybe nothing is native anymore, and I hurt my own feelings. This book has a lot of native species in here. It lets you know if it's edible, which is really nice. There is when it flowers, skunk currant. I bet that smells fantastic. There's different species of, it makes sense, but there's these species that we have here naturally that look like copies, not direct copies. There's obviously some differences, but copies of a lot of the English European plants that were brought over. And it's too bad that we couldn't have propagated those more. The Europeans brought over these other plants because they wanted them as garden ornamentals or whatever, and they probably were a little homesick, to be fair. But it really messed with the ground and the quality, the natural animals and ecosystem that would be here. We actually have a lot more plants that are edible than I realized. And it's so silly because obviously native peoples lived on this land for generations without issues. These books are absolutely fantastic. Most of my viewers are American, so I did go online to look at field guides. I haven't seen any of them, but I did find like a whole series of them that will be in the description below. I highly recommend even just looking through. This is such a cool way to get to know your location, and I was surprised at some of the diversity that I was seeing. These plants that I could use that are local, that I could use in my witchcraft, as long as I'm careful about it. I won't be using any at-risk or endangered species unless I'm purposely planting to try to improve their numbers. But I will share Boulder publications so y'all can find these books. They're good. Like, you could knock out a wall with this book. I will show you some of the other books at a different time. I really hope this was helpful, and I really like these out of the box kind of ways to study witchcraft, especially for people who are in controlled situations like I was growing up. You have to be a bit sneakier about how you get your information. I would assume that most people wouldn't have too much of a problem with you getting to know your local area, but that's tricky too. That was Trees and Shrubs of the Maritimes, and of course, Gardening Month by Month. I'm sure that this type of book exists for different areas. I will have to give it a little look. Once again, this was a secondhand book. I'll see if there's American guides. I'm sure that there is, and I'll provide all of those in the description with links. I don't make anything. I'm not making any money or monetary gain by these recommendations. I just really hope to get resources out for people that might be helpful. I have been your local art witch. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I'll see you all again next time. Bye-bye for now.